Okay. We gotta talk about something. Something that has been bothering me ever since Choose Your Legend 7 came out. That is, of course, in regards to this Brave Robin that we got here. I don't know why it is, but everyone seems to be referring to this dude as being a Godsword unit, which is sort of like a meme at this point, how many Godswords there are in Fae. But people are calling this guy a Godsword when he's not actually a Godsword, so I thought, why not do a little video here to actually clarify to the people what a Godsword actually is. We have this funny little meme here. So, what is a Godsword? We have this lovely Reddit post here by user RedStar5. Shoutouts to RedStar5 if he's watching this, which I highly doubt. Who the hell watches Tacho, right? Okay, so he gives an introduction to Godswords. He gives like a whole clinic of information here. We're only going to take a look at the meat and potatoes, but basically, a Godsword doesn't necessarily even have to be a sword unit. It could also be an axe-type unit or a lance-type unit, and examples of possible god axes and god lances would be like Summer Norn from the Summer Banner, and also Fallen Linus would be a god axe. So those are just a couple of examples, but let's go ahead and take a look at what the meat and potatoes are here, and what is the standard definition of a god sword. So a god weapon, as posted by Red Star here, says you gotta have like 70 plus speed in combat, 80 plus if you're nasty. So the first thing you're gonna want to say is the god sword is stacking speed like crazy. That is a given. They have distant counter. That's not necessarily always gotta be the case. Like, you can have a god sword that doesn't have distant counter. Having units that have far save really impacted on that a little bit, so you could just focus more on running speed boosting skills, but then they went ahead and released distant counter attack speed solo, which just changed everything. So distant counter is sort of borderline. I would actually have that as a secondary component. We have damage reduction, of course, and not just any sort of damage reduction, but specifically speed-based damage reduction, a la dodge, for example, which there's no shortage of dodge skills in this game. Null follow-up, the big one, the most important and defining factor, I would say. Speed was actually like almost irrelevant in Fire Emblem Heroes up until the release of Null follow-up, because there were just so many effects that either gave you a guaranteed follow-up or negated the enemy's follow-up, and they were all on armored units. So when Null follow-up finally released, I was like one of the major people shouting at everyone about how good this skill is. So Null follow-up is the like almost more important than the speed stacking, I would say. So sustain, chip healing is a variety, but it varies on units. So yeah, sustain is one of them as well, one of the main components. Prior to like all the new gold border B skills that we've gotten that can increase healing, like Mystic Boost 4 and Bulwark and etc., in order to get the healing, most people would have run Noontime on their, or Soul even, depending on what the build was, on your Godsword, so you could get some recovery in Aether Raids. And then some flavor, like -1 special trigger, breath effects, pulsing, etc., etc. Yeah, so there's a very loose amount of topics that could fall into this category here, but for the most part, things like -1 special trigger, special ramping, tempo, are things that I would classify in this description here. And then godlike reflexes, or in other words, non-pierceable damage reduction, which is very important now that we have so many skills that can negate damage reduction or reduce it. So godlike reflex is also a component here. And then for secondary components, you've got your typical like support effects, bonus doubler from Eliwood units. You got staff damage reduction from units like Flame. That's not really so much of a thing anymore, though, because I would say it's really just Fallen Maria that's the staff unit of choice at this point. We have Nullify Guard. We have Guard or Ruse, which you can inflict. Pulse Tie, False Start. Nulling unit penalties, very underrated effect, mainly because, like, Legendary Robin is reliant on giving people penalties that people kind of soured on this a little bit, but dude, if you can't use Legendary Robin to support the unit, just go ahead and use Eliwood, or go ahead and use Brave Robin, who gives you the in-combat all stats of 5 with Rally Spectrum. Null foe bonuses, very good. Lull effects are one of the reasons why Eliwood is not quite as strong of a supporter as Legendary Robin, because you can nullify bonuses, so bonus doubler can end up getting shafted, whereas you can't nullify the enemy penalties. That effect is probably coming at some point, but you can't do it at the moment, so Unity stacking with Legendary Robin is probably preferable at the moment. And then Vital Astra would be down here as a secondary component, because GLR is non-pierceable, whereas Vital Astra is pierceable. Although some units, depending on what their weapon does and what their other effects and supports are, may be able to get better usage out of Vital Astra than GLR. So that's pretty much like a summary of what a Godsword typically does. So let's go ahead and take a look at... Well, here we have all of these infantry sword units. We could talk about axes and lances, because there are some god axes and god lances, as I mentioned earlier. But we're just going to focus on god swords today, because that is where the term came from. So, the very first god sword ever introduced into the game was Marita. I remember when this unit came out, this was like the first instance ever in Fire Emblem Heroes since year 1, where I actually thought speed was starting to become relevant. So we go down here, you take a look, her speed stat was base 42, the highest at the time of her release. Now, obviously, units are coming with base 46, which is like base Marito with the boon already. So, super boon and speed is also something typical you see of god swords, and they should be in the highest echelon of speed tiers. So, that's one thing Marita did. But also, it was how well-rounded and how versatile her weapon was at the time. So, she's got -1 special trigger. She's getting all stats up 5, and then she has built-in null follow-up. This was huge at the time, because B skills were so hotly contested. You didn't really know what B skill you wanted to run, because there were so many good options, and null follow-up was actually, even though everyone knew that it was pretty powerful, often fell flat and fell short compared to some of the other B skill options that were available. So, most people still didn't want to run null follow-up, but then once they started giving null follow-up out for free, like built into weapons, built into other passive skills, now we have it as a sacred seal even, we have it as support effects from like infantry speed tactic, infantry null follow-up, etc. So it's just way easier to get null follow-up now, but at the time of Marita's release, it was really not that easy. So there we go, her weapon, you can Gale Force with her, you can bait with her, thanks to the all stats up 4, so this is really the blueprint of what a god sword was. And then her skills, she introduced Close Call, which was our very first instance of a dodge skill in the game. Close Call is still being used to this day in the level 4 version, so just a testament of how big and how impactful this skill actually was on the game. So you're getting damage reduction based on your speed stat, and the faster you are than the enemy, the more the damage reduction is going to pile up. So this is the blueprint of a god sword, and this is what I would classify all god swords strive to be today. Now, Robin is not a god sword. So why do I say that? Why is Robin not a god sword? Let's take a look here. So he is pretty fast. He's got 45 base speed, and he's got the super boon. However, he's not like one of the fastest units right now. I mean, I say that loosely because when everything is taken into account, he can get pretty fast. But that's not really the playstyle that Robin is going for. He's not really like an all-arounder type of unit that can sort of mix and match and play the enemy phase, play the player phase, maybe play a Gale Force role. That's not really what he's trying to do. So I would not classify him as a god sword. What this guy really wants to be doing is just supporting. So you just have him on the team pretty much. Let him use Rally Spectrum to give all your other allies all stats of 5. Let him jump around to those allies. So he's like a warping unit that can also function as a nuker type of unit as well. With his weapon effect here, he can pretty much just bop the enemies with Bonfire or Ignis. It's going to have adaptive damage, and it nullifies damage reduction. So I would classify this Robin more so of a surprise supporter that can possibly nuke something. So he's not really fitting the description of a god sword. He doesn't have like distant counter. He doesn't have -1 special trigger, etc., etc. Okay, then we have this unit here. So Fallen Byleth, one of the top tier premier god swords that was released this year. So this unit, of course, she's got 47 speed with the super boon. That's your first tip off that she is a god sword. We have -1 special trigger, the coveted. She doesn't need godlike reflexes. She has something way better. She's got Divine Pulse. So non-pierceable damage reduction. boosts damage by 25% of her speed, also increases the next attack damage by 20% of her speed, and it stacks more than once. If you activate this once at the start of combat, the enemies hit you, and then you activate it again, it actually stacks for both. So you're getting this to proc, like the additional damage that you're getting here will proc twice. So it's pretty crazy, man. Divine Pulse is probably the single strongest special in the game, I want to say. And it also has the 75% non-pierceable damage reduction, so there you go. Similar to Marita, as we took a look at earlier, she's got all stats of 5. She has built-in sustain. I don't even know why they gave her that. That was just, like, way too much. She has the Vantage effect if she's faster than the enemies. She also has Bulwark, too. Like, that would fall into the category over here where we have, like, some flavors. Where she's, for Violet's flavor skills, I would say she's got the Preempt effect, and then she also has the Bulwark effect there. And then, of course, she's got Close Call 4, and she's got Distant Attack Speed Solo. So this is the, like, today's era version of a Godsword, and as you can see, it's just, like, from where we started to where we are right now, these units are just getting so nuts. Now, Felix is another example of a Godsword. We can take a quick look at him. He's got a pretty high base speed with the Super Boon. He comes with godlike reflexes, and the way that he's trying to play is to just recycle godlike reflexes over and over again. And that is not the worst thing to do, because, of course, godlike reflexes is non-pierceable damage reduction. He's got the -1 special trigger. He's getting all stats of 5. He's got some also built-in DR over here on his weapon. He's inflicting some stat drops on the enemy. And, of course, like I said, he's trying to ramp continuously into godlike reflexes. So he has this effect right here, which gives him -2 special trigger at the start of the turn. And then afterwards, he can just get -1 from that point forward. He's got attack and speed finish, which I would say is pretty fine. It has sustain. It's got the attack and speed bonuses. So even though he doesn't have distant counter, that's fine. He's got Bulwark as well, and then Speed Smoke just to get more instances of dodge. So this is another typical bread and butter Godsword here. Summer Fiorm, she doesn't have godlike reflexes. Again, she has something that's better. She's got Frostbite Mirror, so this is, again, non-pierceable damage reduction. She's got -1 special trigger. Her flavor skill would be Null Sea Disrupt, where she can avoid getting fire sweeped by ranged attackers. She's getting the all stats of 5. She's got this crazy speed check right there. She's inflicting guard on the enemy. And then she's also got Finish 4. She's got a dodge skill, and she's got Times Pulse 4. So this, you see what I'm getting at, right? Like, these Godswords are very easy to spot. Robin is not one of them. You can instantly tell that these three are Godswords, and Robin isn't. And now here's another common misconception. So Diamant is being classified as a Godsword by people. He's not actually a Godsword, but it's kind of a gray area with Diamant. He's like, how do I put this? He's like a regular unit that's wearing a Godsword mask. So he's like in disguise as a Godsword, but he's not really one. So why is that? Okay, he's got 36 speed with the Super Boon, so you actually want to be stacking speed with Diamant, which is why people kind of misconceptualize him as being a Godsword. His weapon has -1 special trigger, all stats of 5. He's got true damage reduction and true damage based on his defense stats, similar to Asker-type units. And then this is where he starts to differentiate a little bit from Godsword. So instead of having null follow-up, Diamant wants to be raising his speed so he can prevent the foes from making a natural follow-up on him. So you want to stack speed so that you can get the most out of this like double phantom speed effect here. That's going to increase the amount of speed needed to get a double attack. Typically you need 5 more speed than the enemy to do a double attack. But in the case of Diamant, he has this effect right here, which makes you need 25 more speed than him to get the double. So this is why speed stacking is very important on him. He has like a new age version of null follow-up is what I would probably call this. Also, he gets -1 special trigger at the start of combat before his first attack. That is a kind of a new thing that we've been seeing lately. We have it on Brave Robin, of course. He gives it with his C skill. Diamant's got it built in. It started off with Brave Tiki, who came with this effect, and it's a pretty nice one. It gets around guard units, and it also can get around scowl units. So you're able to just pop them with a special right away and then just bop them. So I would actually consider Diamant more so of like a brawler, if that makes sense. He reminds me more so of Asker than a Godsword, where you want to just stick him in front. You can rely on him to hold down like the front lines, and then he's making it really tough for the enemies to double him. He's possibly one-shotting enemies that he's attacking. He nullifies guard. He nullifies like all sorts of other things. He gets recovery as well during combat, which passive healing is pretty nice. He's got Bonfire as his special. He has Attack and Defense Finish 4. I would actually say Speed and Defense Finish 4 would be the ideal skill for him, but that doesn't exist, so we gotta settle for this at the moment. Attack and Speed Bulwark, and then Times Pulse 4. So, remember what I said about him being like a Godsword in disguise? That's kind of true. Maybe I'll give people a pass if they want to say Diamant is a Godsword, but not Robin. Like, it's very obvious to me Robin is more of a support-style nuke type of unit, whereas Diamant is more like... It's more hard to define what Diamant actually is, but he is still very unique and different from all the other sword units, so I don't really think he falls in the category of Godsword. Then we have Lucia over here, who... they gave her, what was it called again? Not Nihil, the other skill that she came with in Radiant Dawn. Not as good as Nihil, because Nihil only worked on the enemy, whereas Lucia's skill works on her and the enemy. Hopefully they don't add Nihil into the game. That would just be unfair, but Lucia turns off specials. She's got the minus... Well, actually, hold on. No, she doesn't have -1 special trigger, but theoretically she doesn't even need it, because specials are completely irrelevant on her. So she turns off specials. She's got all stats of 5. She's got null follow-up. She's got null C disrupt, and then she like disables all nonsense enemies may be trying to doing. Like, she has feud built in on all enemies, so no supports. It's just like one-on-one final destination, 4-stock Fox only. That old Melee meme where you know what I'm talking about. That's basically Lucia in a nutshell. And then finally Lumera, free-to-play Godsword here. So not really too much to say about Lumera. She's just your classic Godsword. She doesn't have -1 special trigger, but that's okay. She's got the dodge built in. She's got all stats of 5. She's getting speed up 3. You basically just want to build her with skills relevant of Godswords, like give her dodge 4 in the B skill. You can give her the null follow-up Sacred Seal. You could also give her physical null follow-up if you want. You would want to give her like distant attack speed solo, attack speed finish, etc., etc. So not too difficult to see that Lumera is a Godsword, and that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. I just wanted to clear up the air about what a Godsword is and why Brave Robin is not a Godsword, and I would not consider Diamant a Godsword. So please, if you really want to get on my OCD and get me mad, calling these two Godswords, that's going to do it. So please stop doing that. This is your boy Tacho. Hopefully I cleared the air on this, and I will catch you guys again on the flip side.